Okay. And when you're ready for me to put up the prayers, I will do so.
Sure. Yeah, we can go ahead. I'm just trying to get situated here. You all can see me in the camera okay?
We can. Do you want us to give you another minute or two? Or are you okay?
No, I'm just adjusting my
Okay.
setup today.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So just remembering the last two sessions we had together. So hopefully everyone joining us today was at either both or at least one. And so if you're kind of new to meditating on refuge and bodhicitta and accompanying that meditation with chanting, yeah, try to implement what I said the last two times. This is also a meditation, actually. And so we'll do it once in English, twice in Tibetan. And I'll try to go slowly so everyone can, again, meditate with it a little bit. Just bring it into your mind, into your heart. In English, I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So whatever connection you have to that this morning, connect that in as we chant it in Tibetan. A lot of people sometimes complain, oh, I don't understand. Now you understand. We read it in English. So try to bring it in with the Tibetan. And the Tibetan is not just meaningless. It actually has what we call jinlap in Tibetan, or blessings, because the actual words are imbued with that from practitioners, not only chanting with faith, but also actually realizing refuge and bodhicitta. So just bring that understanding as you chant with the tune, and let the tune open your heart to the song. Sangye chodan sogi chana ma janchu bardu dani ikyabsu chi tagi chunyen ki pe sonam ki droga penche sangye drupar sho sangye chodan sogi chonama jancho bardo dani kyapsu chi agi chenyen ki pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupar sho. Okay, thank you. So it's nice to be with you another Sunday here. We're, I guess, exactly halfway through this 4-part series. And I would like to check in with everyone just how practice is going. I really was hoping you all brought it into your week and tried to work with both the dropping practice and the handshaking. So I'd like to hear how that's going. And aside from that, we're going to move from, I like the way Sonia Rinpoche organizes this, because what we've done so far is actually working skillfully with emotions through the path of healthy human beingness, right? He calls it the path of healthy human being. Just learning how to be more comfortable with the uncomfortable, learning how to meet our emotions and body and sensations and deeper kind of energies and sometimes stuckness with more compassion, more kindness, right? And doing that in a less conceptual way. So this is part of the path of just being a healthier human being, contentment, okayness, maybe we could say a little bit more ease or calmness in our daily experience. So as I stated before, for a lot of us just in the modern world, this is kind of a necessary prerequisite, because if we force ourselves into the path of liberation and try to implement those techniques without an experience of groundedness in the body, sometimes we're doing double work, right? We're trying to calm the body through the thinking mind, and that doesn't work so well. I don't think it's impossible. So if we practice kind of traditional shamatha, we're going to calm down eventually. But I found it really helpful to just learn to relate to my emotions and body in a little bit of a different way. So that's all the path of healthy human beings. So from this point on, we're going to move into the path of liberation, which is all the more or less the traditional teachings on shamatha, vipassana, renunciation mind, bodhicitta, emptiness, the three principal aspects of the path, and how to work skillfully with our emotions through these, right? And again, it's sort of truly working skillfully with one's emotions from the Buddhist approach is actually going beyond the emotion, but not neglecting or negating the emotion. So it's really tricky because when we hear go beyond, it seems like we're going to find something else besides the emotion. But instead, what we find, what the go beyond means is we go beyond a dualistic construct or an independent experience of our emotions. We recognize things as interdependent, right? And therefore, we're able to work more skillfully with emotions that way. That's really the Buddhist path where it aims. So we do end up transcending our fixation on the way our destructive emotions appear and we relate to them. So that is what the path of liberation is for. So, if you're up for that, we'll be talking about that the next 2 weeks. And you could obviously see, even just working skillfully with our emotions on a kind of just finding more health and well-being, is an involved task for a lot of us. I mean, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes work, it takes practice. And of course, the path of liberation, the way we see it from the Buddhist perspective, is for most of us, this is a multi-life. And to practice, we can achieve realization in this life, or at least in the bardo when we die. So this is all possible, especially through the methods of the Vajrayana teachings of Tibetan Buddhism or Himalayan Buddhism. So there's hope either way. But I think I like the Dalai Lama's approach to this, where he says, with the attitude of bodhicitta, we both take a long-term and a short-term view. The long-term view is we drop expectations of quick fix kind of, I'm definitely paraphrasing him here, quick fix kind of mentalities around the Dharma. And we're willing to really put in the work and the time to attain enlightenment and attain realization. But of course, with the bodhicitta attitude, we want to be able to help sentient beings to attain liberation as quickly as possible. So there is also kind of an immediacy in wanting to attain realization, because that's when we're going to really be able to benefit them truly, right? I talked about this I interspersed this with the talks the last 2 times, but we'll focus on this exclusively now. So I don't think you have to feel like you're doing it wrong, or this is going to take forever for you, or it's so much work, it's so overwhelming. Just go step by step is what I encourage. Just try every day to put in time formally on the cushion, informally, and then increase that time. As you find more experience, you're going to naturally want to increase your practice time. As you get more depth in your own emotional healing, as well as the path of liberation, the path of enlightenment, as you gain more experiences, you're just going to want to practice more. We're going to talk a little bit about renunciation mind today. And renunciation mind, really, that's what it's all about. It's about turning the mind away from the activities and the states of mind that are actually causing suffering for ourselves, right? And so we become clear about that. It's not forcing ourselves into a box, a belief, or anything like that. Though belief can act as a temporary thing to kind of have conviction in. But really what we're aiming for is the experience where the mind starts to see the way we're engaging ourselves in reality is just not working. It's not going to provide the happiness we really want. And that's what renunciation mind is. It's a state of mind. It's a way of being where we've turned away from the causes of suffering as much as possible and turned towards the Dharma. So we'll talk about that more later. But nonetheless, until that really happens, it's tough to have energy for practice, or our energy for practice goes in sort of temporary fits where, we're looking for that short-term calm or that short-term peace. So there's nothing wrong with seeking short-term calm or short-term peace. Already the last two Sundays, really that's what we're aiming for, a groundedness and an ability to meet our uncomfortable emotions with more ease, less fighting, less frustration, right? And that's a great temporary goal. But we also need to, according to the Buddha Dharma, we need to seek beyond that, because that's not going to provide ultimate liberation, or we might say ultimate happiness, even though the word happiness kind of dissolves when we're talking ultimately or absolutely, because we go beyond happiness and suffering essentially. So this is difficult to understand. We'll talk about that more next Sunday, but when we relate to the teachings on emptiness. But nonetheless, we just try where we're at. So I just want to keep encouraging you, work from where you're at, and try to have a long-term approach, and don't think, oh, I only do a little, it's not enough, I'm never going to get it. It's a useless thought, in my opinion. You can handshake that thought, right? You can handshake that feeling of, I'm not enough, I'm never going to get it, I'm never going to be able to get enlightened. These are pretty much, in my opinion, it's a waste of our thoughts, but we have to also be kind to those thoughts, because they do come up. They come up for me too. So I have to be kind to those thoughts, and then I just keep practicing. So anyways, that's a little bit of intro today. I'd like to do some practice now. And what we're going to do is kind of review the handshaking practice a little bit, the dropping and the handshaking. And then we're going to move into shamatha, right? So we're going to actually move into the training of working with meditations, working skillfully with emotions through meditation, traditional shamatha and vipassana. So I'll guide it first, and then we can kind of talk about it later. So go ahead and find a posture that's relaxed yet alert. So if you're sitting in a chair or somewhere relaxed, try to scoot to the front of the chair and put something under you. Most of us, just growing up in chairs, our hips aren't that open. So just putting something under you frees up your back. And we want to be able to support ourselves with a straight back, but also being relaxed and grounded in the body. So go ahead and just take a second, 30 seconds or a minute, just to find that in your body. It's not a rigidity. It's more like a sense of upliftedness. This helps to keep the mind alert. So sometimes I like just doing gentle twists in the body, just being kind to myself. I'm not trying to punish myself through meditation. I'm trying to get liberated, Just remembering that. This isn't about being hardcore. It's actually about finding discipline and softness. If you'd like to close your eyes, you can, or leave them open. We're just going to do one physical drop together, and I'll count us off. So on 3, just letting the hands raise up, and after 1, 2, 3, we'll drop together. So 1, 2, 3, ha! Just drop into the body. Close your eyes. Drop anywhere you want to relate to in the physical body, within your sensations, within your moods or emotions. And just try to let be with that. Letting be means we feel the feeling. There's an awareness that's aware of that feeling, but we're not judging. We're not trying to make the feeling better or to increase a feeling that feels blissful or comfortable. We're just being with what's there. So there is a sense of acceptance here, but it's a little bit more subtle than that. With the thinking mind, we drop the thinking mind. With the awareness, we gently connect with the feeling. And since this isn't strictly a concentration practice, everything's allowed to flow, arise, move. If you connect with one sensation and then there's another that pops up, go ahead and connect with that. There's no really rule. The rule is just let yourself become the openness that invites whatever experience. So there's a sense of, or an attitude of openness that's allowing whatever experience to rise in the body. Emotions, sensations, moods, feelings. And sometimes When we connect with the feeling world, we meet beautiful monsters, those parts of ourselves that cause pain, distress. We have our own responses to those. Sometimes we fight them, sometimes we suppress them, sometimes we freeze or numb. And so applying some of the techniques of the handshake practice, which is to meet, is continuing with this letting be, to meet that experience with kindness, with a sense of allowing. Just trying whatever we can, in whatever way we can right now, to not suppress, not become, not run away from, and not to fix or try to manipulate or control through the thinking mind, this experience. Just allowing it to be itself. So our awareness helps to preserve our own space, where we don't have to become the experience, but our kindness and compassion also meets and feels the experience. And there's a willingness to feel some uncomfort. There's a willingness to be with that uncomfort in the body. Primarily emotional, energetic. Physical is also welcome, of course, but really we're working with the emotional reaction. So strangely, when we're able to fully let be with our uncomfortable experiences, it's like a sense of groundness begins to come out of that, a sense of contentment or okayness. The emotions begin to trust us again, because we're not trying to outsmart, outthink, control, or push them around. And over time, out of this sense of contentment comes a sense of essence love. Just this sense of being, not needing so much conditioned existence to help us be happy or be content or okay. Just a sense of deep okayness from within ourselves. And this actually isn't anything that profound. I mean, it's quite profound for a lot of us when we find it for the first time or experience it. Quite life-changing, but it's nothing like not like we're getting enlightened or something like that. It's just basic human okayness. I know when I first encountered Tibetan Buddhism, especially in Asia, I thought, wow, all Tibetans, they seem so enlightened. They're so easygoing, relaxed, happy. And I realized over the years, especially after this practice, they're just not as messed up as me. They haven't had the same conditioning. It actually has little to do with Dharma, or maybe a little bit to do with Dharma, just more cultural, more to do with culture. A way of growing up emotionally connected to earth, especially Tibetans who grew up in old Tibet before the invasion of Tibet. This is also part of our birthright. It's not just a Tibetan thing or any kind of other cultural group. It's our birthright. Try to remember when you were a kid. Sometimes when we are really young, there's just a sense of being happy for no reason. We might call it a sense of being free. So we don't try to produce that as a thought. Try to connect with it via going through our experience. Unfortunately, we have to go through all of the clutter we built up over our life. We have to go through that. No other way, I found. Just moving on in our practice, I'm going to start to cultivate meditative awareness, calm abiding, or shamatha practice. In Tibetan, we call it shine. And so based off a grounded body, a sense of okayness, a sense of calmness in the body, which you may or may not be experiencing right now, so don't worry if you're not experiencing it. We connect with a sense of openness or clarity in the mind. We simply just sustain that based on an object like the breath, the body. We can use sound, we can use the image of the Buddha. There's all these different anchors or objects for shamatha. Or you can simply practice shamatha without support or objectless shamatha, where we don't have an object, there's just simply awareness, resting, and nowness. And so it's helpful here if we open the eyes a little bit. In the Tibetan traditions, we tend to practice with the eyes half open or fully open in some of the Kagyu and Nyingma lineages. So do whatever you feel is appropriate, but this is part of the 7-point posture of Paricana. The eyes are half open. You can place the tongue, if you like, on the top of your palate. This is sometimes helpful for focus and attention. And we're just allowing the eyes to rest, even though they're half open or fully open, about 4 feet in front of us, 5 feet in front of us. And so this sense of groundedness in the body, awareness of that groundedness. Now we just sustain a sense of nowness. So when we study shamatha, there's lots of moving parts to be aware of. And sometimes this can actually bring more agitation in the meditation. We have mindfulness to remember the anchor of meditation, to come back to a sense of nowness when we lose it. We have alertness. We have a sense of conscientiousness to basically see, are we holding awareness too tight or too loose? So there's all these moving parts, and sometimes, at least for me in the beginning, it became overwhelming. So just simplify it. Connect with the breath now, if you'd like, breathing in and out of the nose. Or if there's another anchor of practice you like to work with in shamatha, just connect with that in a gentle way. And we try to allow the mind to stay with. And that anchor is actually just an anchor for awareness to become watchful of. But it's the awareness we're training. So it's not how much we're able to concentrate, it's actually how much we're able to sustain awareness. And we train in sustaining that awareness. And we train in recognizing when we lose that awareness, which would be distraction. Getting lost in thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future. We just simply bring our mind or awareness to this sense of nowness and try to sustain that as best we can. With enough effort, but also with a sense of ease. We're not pushing too hard, but we're also not lax. If you find yourself simply aware of each moment as it passes, it's allowing this sense of stability to come forward. There's really nothing more to do. Just allow that to take place with enough effort to sustain awareness and enough effort to recognize when we've lost that awareness and to come back. So again, what we're seeking here is to strengthen our awareness. This allows for Vipassana or insight meditation to actually have fruit, to bear fruit, to be effective later on when we implement them. So the word calm abiding sometimes is the words calm abiding, the definition of shamatha, but actually can be misleading. Because We're not trying to attain calmness, we're using calmness as a base to attain stability of awareness. And slowly we move through the 9 stages of calm abiding. That awareness becomes more refined. Our ability to rest with that awareness becomes more and more effortless. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with this kind of meditation. It's pretty much what's introduced in even secular mindfulness. But the purpose is a little different here. So the method can be very similar. We'll practice another 5 minutes like this, and I'll just leave some silence for you to work on your cultivation of awareness. So notice what you need here. You need to come back to the body. When we use the breath as an anchor, we also use the body. Do you need to relax the body? Or do you need to uplift or increase the effort a little bit? This quality of remembering awareness. So the mindfulness maybe needs to tighten. See what you need. And often when we think we need to tighten, we need to loosen, especially if we have a lot of anxiety and stress. Sometimes the anxiety and stress causes laxity or kind of getting distracted really easily or falling asleep. So actually we need to rest in the practice. Be aware. Just experiment, see what you need, see what helps you to sustain awareness naturally. You have to see what's the right amount of effort. If you've been working with an anchor so far, the breath, the body, an image, something you're staring at, just in our last minute or two of practice, see if you can allow the awareness to come forward and the anchor to start to fade into the background. So there's a sense of mind that's aware of that anchor. See if you can just connect with that. Just allow a sense of aware openness. We're not losing the awareness, but we're also not focusing on anything particularly. Everything's allowed: sights, sounds, smells, tastes, even thoughts. The awareness knows what's arising, what's falling, but we're not losing the awareness when a sound comes, for instance. And if we notice we lost the awareness, as soon as we recognize that, we're back in awareness. No anchor to come to, just awareness itself. So practice that for a minute or two. If you've never done it before, just try your best. And completely dropping the practice, just coming into your heart, letting go of thoughts, if it went well or it didn't go well. Just appreciating yourself for putting in the effort into the practice. Appreciating that effort, we start to dedicate the merit briefly in our heart that any qualities of awareness we've been able to train in, develop just in this short time, may they become causes for uncovering our Buddha nature. We dedicate that merit to the benefit of all beings through our own awakening. Okay. Thank you for your practice. So, I would love to hear from you, just as we kind of wrap up the sections on embodied awareness or handshaking and dropping. If there's anything, any remaining questions or things that came up this week for you as you practiced, just feel free to unmute yourself and.
I have to admit that when we did the drop it, I was a little embarrassed with the ha. I was, but I have to tell you, I've done it. I found myself doing it so many times this week in the car. I mean, what a great practice! So useful. And at the beginning, I'm telling you, I was like, I'm not doing that. That's a little embarrassing. But it was fantastic. It's been fantastic for me, and the handshake too.
Awesome. Yeah, and you don't always have to do the ha or kind of like physically drop. I think that's more something when we're alone, and maybe there's not people, because maybe we do that and we scare people, or they, like that, and they think what we're doing is weird, and then they get turned off by Buddhism. So this is just good, I think, in the beginning, because we get a clear sense of what's happening when we drop, and then what we can actually do is just more of a subtle thing, just drop internally. So, you can use the ha and the physical kind of dropping when you need, but see if you can just sometimes sometimes it could just be like super simple like that. Or, for me, it just looks like this. I didn't, it's just more internal, right? But good. Yeah. Awesome.
So Scott, excuse me, one of the things that I found that I did do and is I immediately label the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And is that, and then I think, oh, I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just takes time, because sometimes we have habits. It was like that for me in the beginning first, because I think one of the first Buddhist practices I was introduced to was the style of Vipassana we find in Theravada Buddhism, where you are labeling the emotion, and this is helpful, of course, but it's a little bit different than what this practice is doing, and so yeah, I think just the more you do it and you notice the labeling, it's not like you have to do anything with that. You notice the mind labeling, but you just like, okay, who cares? You kind of just let the, we end up kind of becoming more like 70-80% of our attention is with the body, and then like thoughts are allowed to move and arise and fall, um, including labeling thoughts, but we just don't kind of give them too much credence, and then over time you'll kind of more interesting stuff, like the awareness will become more subtle, and it'll become more interesting what you're connecting with in the body, not interesting in like, oh, juicy kind of way, but just you're going to become more open, and then the awareness becomes more subtle of what it can be aware of, and then it's like much more interesting than the thinking mind usually. But yeah, it's normal. It's just, and if we don't have a thought of labeling, we'll have some other thought, which is like, for me, it's either it was labeling at the beginning, but normally it's more like, at the beginning it was also, um a lot of like analyzing the feeling, like so labeling is kind of an analytical, like analyzing the feeling, but it also can be a not within this handshaking practice, but a separate practice that can also be beneficial, obviously. Yeah, thanks.
So Scott, when you're looking at the emotions, are you looking at it sort of as an outside observer of the emotion, and that way realizing what it is, or aren't you really supposed to be looking at it sort of as an outside emotion? It's more of just the entirety that you're looking at it as.
Like the entirety of your physical, like feeling world experience.
Yeah, the entirety of like your mind is just unified with it rather than trying to look outside into it.
Got it. Yeah. I think this is kind of, it's hard to describe in language, because we actually just have to kind of experience it and see for ourselves what that is. But yeah, it's definitely, I would describe it in language as, sometimes inadequate as in my language is, as yeah, we're not watching it from the outside, because then sometimes there can be like a coldness and we're not actually feeling it. So as long as we're feeling it, it's okay however you're watching it, right, is what I would say. So the awareness is kind of the watchfulness, and the awareness can't feel, because awareness is a state of mind, right? It's a quality of mind, but awareness is aware we're feeling it. So there is a quality of our cognizance that is feeling, right? There's a quality of, sometimes Soknir Rinpoche says the feeling feels the feeling, because there's kind of an inadequate way to talk about this in language, but that comes the closest. And yeah, and I think sometimes in traditional Vipassana practice, we get used to this kind of watching as if we're kind of a lord of our experience. And I actually think this is also disconnected from the intention of the practice traditionally, even. So it's kind of like, but it's tough, because we, when we've spent our life suppressing our emotions, it's very easy to just become like, well, I'm just going to watch them, and then they disappear. And I don't know, it's not like there's something wrong with that, but it can be kind of cold and disconnected sometimes. But that's just a side note, Glenn. So I would say, to answer your question more fully, yeah, it's not quite unified, but it's a little closer to that. It's like there's this, I like to have a panoramic awareness of the body too. So there's a sense of the body from head to toe, and then I might be feeling like anxiety in my belly, but it's being experienced within the whole, as opposed to like hyper focused on the anxiety, and then there's a watchfulness that is kind of with that, and not separate from it.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Perfect sense.
Cool. Yeah, the words make sense when you're practicing, because they're like, oh yeah, that's a kind of a way to describe what I'm experiencing, you know? So perfect. Anyone else? Anything coming up for you in practice? Okay. So, you know, of course, you're welcome to ask if you want to just continue these practices that we've been doing so far, and you have questions like next Sunday or whatever at the end of today. Feel free. It's not like this. What do they call the statute of limitations is over, but we will kind of move on in the information, right? But you know, maybe to say one more thing on this, you know, this has been part of my practice for the last maybe 11, 12 years. um you know, I kind of like I had 10 years of pretty traditional Tibetan Buddhist methods and practices where I didn't really integrate anything else until I met Sonia Rinpoche in 2010. And uh you know, because he's a tulku and a lineage holder and, you know, a respected lama, it kind of gave me permission as sort of a very biased Buddhist, like, oh, I don't want any of this psychology stuff. You know, this is all, you know, going to pollute the Dharma kind of attitude. That was my attitude, you know, prior to 2010. And I think that's not, there's no blaming anyone. That was my attitude. That's something, you know, my bias that developed. And, and so, you know, I think because he was a lineage holder and a very, very, you know, good Lama, it gave me permission to try some of this. Then I realized that, you know, it's okay to bring practices in that help us to heal. Just don't get that confused with the path of liberation. I think that's often what's tricky these days, because we have so much in the meditation world. Is like, it's a huge industry, as all of you know, and there's so many different things, and not even just in meditation. Now things like plant medicine is very popular in, you know, in people, and these kinds of like recapturing kind of, you know, some connection to indigenous things. And, you know, these are all very beautiful and actually can help to heal trauma and, you know, emotional problems and things like that. But from the Buddhist perspective, they don't actually go all the way, right? So they can provide some relief and some shift and transformation, but they don't actually liberate us from the root of the suffering, right? And so, as long as we're aware of that, in my opinion, we can use different methods and systems. And of course, you know, having a personal therapist is wonderful to work with our emotions if it's a good therapist. And those can be skillful tools. Again, we just don't replace the path of liberation with that, right? So I think when we assist the path of liberation, you know, we can even as a if we're, you know, into, you know, traditional Tibetan Buddhism, and we ascribe to it, and we have a regular practice of that and understanding, and it's framing our life, we can even bring bodhicitta motivation into these kinds of things. So for me, encountering handshaking and dropping practice in 2010, immediately I just started to think, oh, okay, this is how I started to experience also, this is how I'm going to heal some of my just things from this life. It's not past life stuff. It's the result of karma, but it's things that happen to me this life in youth or whatever. I can do that as a way to open up a more, you know, openness in my system, so that I can then engage the Dharma in a more skillful way. And I can do that with a motivation of bodhicitta. So I would encourage you all, if you have a traditional Buddhist practice, it's okay to do these things. Bring in bodhicitta. Make it part of that bodhicitta motivation. It doesn't mean the method is going to liberate you, but it does mean you're using it as something for you to work on your path to eventually be able to liberate yourself in order to benefit all beings, even though it might not have all of the components of liberation within it. You know, but the handshaking is quite profound. It can actually become a vipassana practice. So once we know more elements of insight meditation or different methods and styles, it can kind of go into Dharma, is my experience. But in the beginning, it's not often like that for people. They're just working on the relative level with emotions, right? So anyways, just a few more tidbits to say around this. I hope it's helpful and not too wordy. So like I said, what I wanted to get into is really, you know, a path of liberation, or, you know, traditional path of Buddha, traditional Buddhist approach to working skillfully with emotions for the rest of this session and next session. And really the framework for that, for those of you who are familiar with, traditional Tibetan Buddhist Dharma, the three principal aspects of the path of the Lam Rim is really, I think, it's a simple and complete framework, where we're developing a connection to renunciation mind, to bodhicitta, and to the view of emptiness, which actually is what cuts the root of suffering. And so it goes through this progressive path of gaining more of a taste of these three principles and all the components of them to actually bring about a truly skillful way of working with emotions, right? We would call this kind of like more the absolute or the ultimate way of working skillfully with emotions. I wanted to introduce Shamatha a little bit today. I know a lot of you are familiar with Shamatha meditation, and we can talk more about that if you want, if it comes up in the Q&A. And the reason I wanted to introduce that is initially this is from a meditative point of view, this is kind of one of the first practices we are introduced to as a way to work skillfully with emotions. So to repeat a little bit what I did in the guided meditation, shamatha is simply gaining more stability of awareness, right? It's a way we work to stabilize this sense of nowness and the quality of mind that can be watchful over that nowness. So awareness is something we're all born with. It's not something, actually it's not something we need to get from someone else or something else. It's there. It's just a muscle that we don't often train in. And so sometimes what we're stuck in is a sense of normal awareness, where there's awareness, but we're not recognizing that we're using that awareness. And so we're not able to train it. And so a lot of Buddhist practice or Buddhist meditation starts with training that awareness, along with the view of renunciation, mind, bodhicitta, and emptiness. Those are all views that we're adopting to bring in. But the training in awareness is the start, because if we don't have strength of awareness, it's very difficult to sustain any of this. It's very difficult to penetrate through insight or analytical meditation into these aspects or attitudes of renunciation, mind, bodhicitta, and then the experience of emptiness. And so, as most of you know, because you've probably received lots of teachings on this, shamatha has stages that we move through and we train in, and how it relates to emotions is actually, it's a little bit of a suppression technique. So we've kind of been doing the opposite so far, right? We've kind of not been suppressing on purpose, but shamatha actually, what it does to the emotions is it temporarily suppresses them. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but it helps us to gain a little bit more groundedness, calmness, as well as clarity of mind and awareness, as I've been saying. And what that does is it kind of like temporarily reduces the strength of our emotions, right? So some of you who have gone on like a meditation retreat where the primary practice is shamatha, I'm sure you came out, wow, I feel so much more clear, so much more calm and open. And this is basically because we train the awareness, this aspect of mind that can be watchful of each moment. And then we kind of temporarily suppress the emotions. But what happened after a week, I'm pretty sure your emotions came back, right? So we could see it's not an ultimate fix for this, or it's not an ultimate way we work with it, but it's temporary, because if we don't have that, when we're working with insight meditation or all the different kinds of methods of vipassana or insight meditation, it's really difficult to penetrate the vital points with that practice. It's really difficult to penetrate into these aspects of how we're holding onto a solid or reified I and other. So shamatha is the basic training for that, to just gain a little bit of space, I call it, right? And of course, it is a skillful way to work with our emotions, because if we are gaining more facility in shamatha, our emotions aren't going to be as strong, and then of course it's easier to work with them. We just don't stop there. Lama Tsongkhapa and others, basically point out shamatha itself, or calm abiding practice itself, is not necessarily even a Buddhist technique. It's shared in a lot of different traditions, right? And if we don't eventually bring shamatha into vipassana practice, we can attain very high states of concentration or very high states of being settled and aware, but we won't actually be able to cut the root of the suffering. And so some of you who have studied more traditional Tibetan Buddhism, like the Lam Rim, these are the states that people attain in some of the formless God realms. So, in the 6 realms of samsara, you have the peak of samsara, these formless God realms, where if one really meditates, we're not talking like a 30-minute, practice in the morning. We're talking yogis in the mountains, who attain high states of concentration, or sometimes go into what are called the jhanas or absorptions. When they die, they can attain these formless realms. From a Buddhist perspective, it's not that useful, because in the end, we have to fall back down into other rebirths and other realms, and we don't actually cut the root of samsara. So next Sunday, we're going to be talking about the view of emptiness, the view of shunyata, and sort of cutting the root of samsara. And really, I would say that the main way we work with emotions skillfully in Buddha Dharma, but nonetheless, we'll focus on renunciation mind and bodhicitta today to prepare for that. So if you have any questions of Shamatha, you can ask in a bit. I'm not going to say more about it. I think a lot of you are familiar with it, so it's not like I have to say a bunch. But renunciation mind. So, I think this is one of those things that's very difficult for us as modern practitioners. I don't know about you, but it's very difficult for me. We have, a lot of material development, I'm guessing most of the places, all of the places we're living, in this group here. I don't know. I don't know if some of you are in a developing country, but nonetheless, in the United States, just use as an example, we have a lot of comfort. We often grow up with that comfort. We grow up with expecting a certain amount of material development, and if we see from the culture itself, not to criticize it, it pretty much reinforces that by saying this is the most important thing for you to do, right? like the most important thing is to earn money, have your little nest or big nest, make sure you have retirement and all of that, right? I don't think it's good news, but in a way, like what's happening now can feed our renunciation mind, because we can see that the financial system is basically built on nothing, and our dollars are actually disappearing. But I'm not going to go on a rant about that, about inflation. But anyways, these are sometimes good things we can bring in to reflect on renunciation mind, just to pull away, reduce some of our attachment to that. But basically, my point is, we have this extra layer as modern practitioners. When they're talking about renunciation mind in Tibet, these are people who most of them, besides maybe a king of an area or something, grew up with very little. There's very little material possessions. That doesn't mean that they still don't have the qualities of mind of clinging and aversion, that want more material possessions or fight others to achieve that. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen. That obviously happens in everywhere throughout history. It's just part of the samsaric mind. But nonetheless, as modern practitioners, we have this extra hurdle to sort of recognize that, and actually it's not necessarily an impediment. It can also be a boon, because we can see a lot of us have attained wealth. A lot of us have, attained as the material comfort we want, right? And we see, I'm still not happy. So it can be a boon in that way too, where we can use that to develop more renunciation mind. But nonetheless, either way, we have to develop some quality of distaste for where the mind seeks happiness, where there's no happiness to be found. Again, this is really the definition of renunciation mind. Doesn't mean you can be as rich as Elon Musk and have a renunciation mind. It actually doesn't matter. You can be as poor as, I don't know, I'm looking at farmers here in Colombia down below our call, poor as them, maybe like they make, I don't know, 500,000. The dollar is really big in Colombia, so 500,000 pesos is like nothing. It's like, I don't know, probably $200 or something. No, it's a little more than that. Yeah, $200. Maybe they make less than that a month. So it could be as poor as that. But either way, either one can have a renunciation mind or not, right? Because it depends on our attitude. It depends on our way of thinking and relating. So to repeat, if I can remember it, it's really about developing a distaste in the causes of suffering and sort of placing our happiness in something that's not going to provide happiness, right? Just to be clear. And the reason I like to point that out is because we can get all sorts of fantasies. If only, I was able to become a monk or a nun when I was younger. If only, I didn't have all this debt or something like that. And yeah, there's a reason people become monks and nuns. I got to do it for 9 years. It's a really cool thing. It really does help. It did help my renunciation mind, but was I renounced as a monk? No. I had my attachment to my laptop and food and all kinds of things, right? So renunciation mind is really seeing through meditation where the mind is getting caught in placing our hope. Again, I'm just repeating it in lots of different ways. So we have to come to the point where we actually give up hope in certain, we could say it's not just material comforts. It's actually just sort of, it could be in a person, it could be in a thing, it could be anything. And it's not necessarily like it has to be something material. It can be a thought, it can be an emotion. We have to see through that that's actually putting more energy into that is not necessarily going to produce happiness. And that's how we develop renunciation mind. I mean, that is the mind of renunciation. And what this does is it allows us to turn our mind more towards the Dharma. It allows us to stop wasting time. It allows us to practice more because, when we shift from putting energy into one thing, it's naturally going to shift into what actually is going to produce genuine happiness, which is the path of Dharma. But if we just beat this into ourselves without getting an experience, I don't think it's that helpful, right? We need to develop the experience. So traditionally, we develop the experience really through 4 types of analytical meditations, right? We find in the lower and medium scopes of the Lam Rim. So we develop a sense of what we have, right? The actual jewels, the gold we have with this human body. We call it meditating on perfect human rebirth. We develop a sense of that being finite. That's not going to last forever. And not only is it not going to last forever, we don't know when it's going to be gone, right? We don't know how much time we have in this particular human body. And then third, we don't know if we're going to get it again, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen when our mind and body part this life. So that's the reflection on death and impermanence. Third, we reflect on karma, cause, and effect, right? That effects come from causes, and those go from gross things like you plant an orange tree, you plant an orange seed, you're going to get an orange tree, to very subtle forms of cause and effect. That when we plant the seed of a certain emotion and we believe that emotion and we take refuge in that emotion, it's going to produce more versions of that emotion or more of those thoughts or behaviors. And so we have to gain some conviction in karma, cause, and effect. Sometimes in the traditional Dharma, they use it as a scare technique. That works. I don't know if a lot of people like that in the modern world, but nonetheless, actually what's more important is to just recognize the importance of it. Whether we use it as a scare technique or not, the importance is to see clearly, this is just like another layer of cause and effect. Karma is another layer of the world. I can't see it, but we have to reflect on it to gain conviction that it's another layer. So it affects our behavior. It affects, what we say with our speech, what we do with our mind, and of course the actions or behaviors of our body. And so the more and more we take that seriously, actually we reduce our load. So again, it's not like we can just sit down and practice shamatha and vipassana and attain realization. Maybe. But if our karmic load is really heavy, we're going to have so many obstacles to that. So when we pay attention to karma, cause, and effect, it's actually just about lessening our obstacles. And of course, it's about growing this quality of renunciation mind, because karma, cause, and effect is not a rule coming from the outside. It's actually recognizing that we think we're free, or we have, enough money or whatever it is, but we're in bondage. We're actually slaves. And what are we slaves to? We're slaves to our own habitual patterns, right? On different levels. I noticed people left the thing. Renunciation mind always will get, it always gets a crowd, happy. So, we have to also take this with a grain of salt, because I'm not trying to bum you out. but I do have to talk about it because it's really important, right? But the point is not to receive these teachings with a sense of fear. I think the point is to receive them with a sense of sobriety. We're trying to get sober here. We're trying to get clear. Why am I doing all these things that I think are going to produce happiness, but they don't? Why am I stuck in the same places where I am with my emotions? And so at some point we have to look at karma, cause, and effect, and we have to take responsibility for that, and also recognize I'm a slave to my karma. I don't want to be a slave to my karma. And then we start to seek the mind of liberation, right? Or we start to seek renunciation mind. We start to really reflect on that. And the good news is karma, cause, and effect is a relative truth. It's relative like the chair you're sitting on. It's relative like Democrat and Republican. It's relative like this meal is amazing or not amazing. It's all relative. It's all based on opinion or conjecture, actually, or consensus, like a group agreeing with each other, right? So we call this relative truth. We'll talk about that more next Sunday. But nonetheless, karma is relative, and that's a really good thing. Because if karma is ultimate, we're screwed. There's no way to attain enlightenment. You just enjoy. Just do what you do. Don't care. And we call this nihilism, actually. And, we have to be a little bit vigilant against this too, because sometimes over materialism creates a sense of nihilism, right? Where cause and effect doesn't matter. Just be as happy as you can, each to his own, do what you do. I say good luck with that. We have to question that if that's actually going to produce genuine happiness for us. But nonetheless, karma, cause, and effect is something relative. That means it can be changed, transformed, and eliminated. That's the good news. That's the good news, right? So karma isn't always bad news. I think some people take karma, cause, and effect teachings as some sort of like theistic thing that like Buddhists, I thought Buddhists didn't believe in God. Suddenly they're telling me karma is God. No. Karma is just a relative truth, So the goal of the path is to actually reduce negative karma and then eliminate it completely. A Buddha has no karma. They've gone beyond karma, right? So that is the goal. But first we have to recognize the problem, because if we don't recognize the problem, there's no way to seek a remedy outside of that, right? So that's why we reflect on karma, cause, and effect. So then fourth, which I think for me, these are probably the most transformative analytical meditation on renunciation mind, is really just reflecting on the nature of samsara, right? And we can find this in the Lam Rim in different ways. For me, the most accessible version and the most condensed is really reflecting on the three types of dukkha, or the three types of suffering. So this is the suffering of change, and what we call pervasive compounding suffering, or all pervasive suffering. So the suffering of suffering, we all know what that is, sickness, old age, death, problems, financial problems, relationship problems, meditation problems. All of that is the suffering of suffering. Emotional problems, what this topic is, right? That's all suffering of suffering. Now, suffering of change is more subtle. Suffering of change is actually, usually we get fooled when we're not reflecting on this, or we don't have an experience of these meditations. We get fooled because, we go on a long walk. We're super happy in the beginning of the walk. Sweet, I get to go into the forest, into nature. This is amazing. And if you push that walk a little too far, for whatever too far is for you. For me, like anything after 3 hours is a little tough on my body. So, after that 3-hour mark, suddenly that really blissful walk actually turned into suffering. And then I'm craving to go back home, sit in a chair, lay down, whatever it is. And then I'm sitting in a chair, laying down, and then I get bored after a while. I need to move. Or like, sometimes if it's an uncomfortable bed or whatever, my body hurts afterwards. So this is all, just examples to describe suffering of change. It's actually the moment we experience so-called happiness or pleasure, but it's actually in the nature of change. And therefore, it has this quality of being suffering of change. So this is something we have to reflect on. It's not something that like immediately we go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Usually we have to meditate on that. And then the third type is really the one that's more insidious, because it's the pervasive suffering that just by the very fact that because of karma and delusion, we produced a body, even though it's we have this human opportunity, which is incredible. We still have to experience sickness, old age, death, all the emotional suffering throughout our life, the ups and downs. So it's pervasive because we're born into this body and there's no choice. We have to go through it, right? So all of this is not to present bad news to depress us more. I think we have so much bad news these days, right? I mean, news is bad news because that makes money for some reason. So this isn't, the Buddha didn't, talk about these or try to teach us these to bum us out. It's actually, again, to get some sobriety or clarity of our experience. So, in the First Noble Truth, the Buddha really encouraged no suffering, no KNOW, no suffering. And what he's implying there is reflect on it. Not because we're trying to make more suffering or we're trying to dwell on the suffering, but because actually what we're trying to do is see clearly what the suffering is. Because until we see clearly, we're not going to want to seek a remedy out, right? And I think for a Buddhist practitioner, in my opinion, what's more important is these subtle aspects of suffering, right? Suffering, we all know that, and it's important to reflect on it. But actually, suffering of change and pervasive suffering, I think, is more important, right? Because it's suffering of change where we get caught often. Suffering sometimes we can't avoid. We just get sick, or and it's good when we're sick to reflect on I'm experiencing my karma, I'm purifying that karma, I'm this is a result. It's good to also reflect on renunciation mind, to want to attain a liberation because of that. But really, we have to understand on a more subtle level what's happening here, which is that because we believe in a solid fixed existence, we produce this body that feels solid and experiences all these things. We're really going to talk about this next week, but I keep alluding to it because the teachings on wisdom or the prajnaparamita or the prajna, the wisdom nature coming from Buddhism, if we don't have a clear understanding of that, all of this is very, I don't know, medieval, you know what I mean? So really, emptiness is where it's at, because the more energy we put into understanding that, meditating on it and experiencing it, the renunciation mind is going to also grow, because we start to see, okay, it's not just about being bummed out. I have to experience this suffering and all of that. We see I have the potential to liberate that completely. And it happens from the inside out, right? And so what we start to see is our clinging as the problem. And then we want to start to remedy that. So for me, these reflections on perfect human rebirth, death and impermanence, karma, cause and effect, and nature of suffering are incredibly important. I've done them. I do them every day to a certain extent, and I've gone into retreats on them and things like that. And I encourage you to do that. But actually, what really helped me to connect a little bit more with renunciation mind was studying emptiness. So it's different for each of us. I just want to point that out. There is this route of progressively going through first renunciation mind and bodhicitta, then emptiness. But some of us actually can experience renunciation mind via going to emptiness first. So what I encourage is kind of do it all. We can do it in a very progressive way, but sometimes it can be quite tough because we're kind of like seeing it from we're looking at an object. We're looking at this thing, and then renunciation can seem like, oh, I got to reject all these things. No, we have to reject the mind that clings to dualistic reality. That's what we're actually trying to form in renunciation mind. That's actually what renunciation mind is all about. But nonetheless, like on a very conventional relative level, reflecting on, analyzing these four I described briefly can be beneficial too, because it starts to turn our mind away from this life. We start to turn away from, just seeking happiness in momentary pleasure. I don't know about you, but for me, I really see where my mind gets caught in that suffering of change, because often what's happening is I'm just caught in this wheel or circle of seeking momentary pleasure, where it's like, get up, sit down, eat, watch something, talk with someone, meditate. Meditation can also become part of that momentary pleasure too, if we're not careful, right? So what I'm saying is we have to interrupt that. We have to see the mind seeking that and question, right? What we start to question is, taking refuge in this sandwich, is that really going to, I like food a lot. So taking refuge in this sandwich, is that really going to provide happiness for me? Now, do we then throw the sandwich out? I don't know. I still eat the sandwich, but I eat it with a new view. I eat it with less clinging, less attachment. In a way, I can kind of enjoy it more. And in another way, I put the focus where it needs to be. I can offer the sandwich with my mind. This is why we have offering practices. Offering practices are a wonderful way to connect with renunciation mind, because we're giving it away. Mandala offerings, for instance, they're all about giving everything away, right? To the lineage, to the guru, to all beings. And we start to become more free because of that. So I think what we need to really reverse, just to add to this conversation, is the attitude that getting more for ourselves is actually going to bring happiness. And renunciation mind helps with that. So second, and then we'll continue on with bodhicitta next Sunday, is the mind of bodhicitta. And this is a huge topic. And I know probably a lot of you have studied it already and are practicing it. And I really rejoice in that. But nonetheless, if our practice of shamatha and vipassana is not embraced by bodhicitta, it will not produce the qualities of liberation. And this is pretty subtle, in my opinion. It's kind of like, I've heard this for 20 plus years. And in the beginning, I took it more on belief, like, okay, but I didn't really understand, like, how can just an aspiration, like this aspiration, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings, or may this meditation session become a cause for enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Just that dualistic thought, how can that bring about liberation, right? And this is a tricky one, so we kind of have to unpack this one. So I'll unpack this slowly. I just wanted to put the question forward first. But nonetheless, to define bodhicitta, just breaking down the Sanskrit word, we have bodhi, which is awakening or awakened, and chitta, the mind, or sometimes like chitta implies like a heart mind, right? And so it's this heart of awakening or mind of awakening. And we have the relative aspect or the conceptual one of, we're developing this aspiration. May I attain awakening for others. We recited that chant at the beginning of today. We meditated on it a little bit today. It's something all, Buddhists do at the beginning of their session. They start their session motivating that the session can, aspiring that may this be a cause for awakening. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, in his Bodhisattva beauty, he's always introducing lojong techniques and slogans and practices for bringing in this aspiration into everything we do. I mean, I've been with Rinpoche at meals where it takes 2 hours to eat because he's going through, like making aspirations. So bodhicitta in the beginning is really an aspirational practice. I think this is kind of tough sometimes for us as well, because aspirations don't seem solid enough. Where is this making change? How is this affecting people and myself if I'm just thinking about it? And so we do have to do some reflection. Those can be some of the doubts. So we do have to do some reflection on why aspirations are powerful and how important they are. Just briefly, I'll say, everything is actually an aspiration. When we think, I really want to go get a latte, at my favorite neighborhood coffee place, we're aspiring, I aspire to drink a latte, right? What does that aspiration lead to? If we have enough attachment and enough time, we go and get the latte. So it leads to action, right? It's the same in here. It's not like spiritual and worldly are necessarily different on the conceptual level. Meaning when we're applying concept, of course, the concept itself can be different. So aspiration here is a very powerful tool because we're getting used to something. We're getting used to an idea. Enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. I mean, have any of you thought, what the hell does that mean? Have any of you, anytime you chant that, I don't even know what this means. I mean, I've been practicing 22 years. I know what it means, but do I really know what it means? Because do we know what enlightenment means? Yes, we can describe Zhangchu, what do you call it? Sangye. We can break down the word of Buddha in Tibetan. We can break down, the elimination of suffering and the powers that a Buddha has and all these things. That's all philosophical. Do we really know what enlightenment means? No, of course not. We're not going to know until we attain it. But we start to gain some experience through practice, through aspiration, of course, through meditation, bringing out our Buddha nature, uncovering our Buddha nature more and more, which is ours, right? And we start to see those qualities more and more, especially as we study and meditate on emptiness. We start to see that more and more. And that also helps this aspiration. Because this aspiration is not of bodhicitta, is not, may I become the savior of all beings, right? What it's saying is, may I, first of all, wake up to my own illusion, cut through my own projection, and then may I help others to cut through their own projection. We can't cut through anyone's projection. If we could, the Buddha would have already done it for us. He or she, Tara, whatever, would have already enlightened us. It's not possible. Each sentient being has to do it themselves, but we can be influenced by enlightened beings. So when we're making that aspiration, we're aspiring to be an influencer in the best sense, right? We're aspiring to do that via knowing the nature. Because right now, I don't know about you, I don't know the nature fully, And so what happens is I get caught in my own delusion. So how is my own delusion going to, help anyone to actually find absolute freedom or absolute happiness? So we have to reflect on this carefully, because then we form the wish. Actually, it's a little sad, for me at least, because first there's the acceptance that I'm not going to be able to benefit others at my current state. I can help them with temporary things. I can, give Dharma teachings and things like that, and that's great. But until I really bring out the full capacity of my Buddha nature, there's still confusion there. So how is a confusion going to remedy a confusion? You see what I'm saying? And mostly when I teach Dharma, I'm teaching what I've heard, right? I'm teaching from the texts, from the words of my teachers. And so I'm relying on that. But nonetheless, when we become a fully enlightened Buddha, we don't have to rely on that anymore. I mean, we might, but we can rely on all kinds of other techniques and skillful means to benefit others, because we see the nature of reality clearly, and we've totally unfurled and removed all of our own confusion. And so once we gain some kind of, like at least in conviction in the mind, that kind of makes sense, then the aspirational bodhicitta really makes sense. It really clicks that how important that is to do, right? Just this simple wish, due to this practice, due to this teaching, due to reading Dharma, due to washing this dish, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of others. And we start to train in that through the 4 immeasurables. I'll talk about that next time. Through 7-point cause and effect instruction, like Lojong, through Tonglen. There's all kinds of techniques to bring more, first, limitless compassion and loving kindness out in our experience, and then moving that into bodhicitta. But truly, just to simplify it, the bodhicitta really grows when we start to see how much illusion we're stuck in, and we start to experience that illusion as an illusion. And when that happens, we can see how everyone is stuck in illusion. So all this suffering is unnecessary. Samsara is actually unnecessary. And so there's a deep compassion that wells up from that. Wow, it's totally unnecessary. Yet we're all clinging to that, for life. And we're all producing samsara every moment. And so a deep level of compassion and bodhicitta start to arise from that. Bodhicitta being the altruism that says, I'm going to help. I'm going to do something about it, right? Via my awakening. Working on my awakening. So in this sense, actually, it's not like someone out there with the most successful NGO is necessarily doing something better than a nun in the Himalayas who never talks to anyone and just does her practice all day. From a Buddhist perspective, this nun, most likely, though I can't say 100%, is actually more beneficial. She's doing more benefit. But this is a tough one we have to reflect on. So it's getting late. I wanted to leave some time for Q&A. So I'll leave it there, and we can kind of pick up on bodhicitta next week. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. And if there's any questions or anything, feel free. It's a lot. I'm trying to put all the 3 principal aspects of the path in 2 days. 2 hour-and-a-half sessions.
Scott, you know, one thing you talked about a little, it's very hard to do, is in the United States or like the Western world, where all the emphasis is pretty much placed on material things and, you know, gaining wealth. And it's almost like you grew up with the belief those were the things you were after.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you do this, you have to kind of completely do like a 180 almost on all the things that you've done like your whole life and believed for your whole life. Even with jobs, say like a salesperson and things like that, you know, you might say, you know, salespeople, you know, they do some good because they get, you know, things for people, but they also bother a lot of people who don't really want to hear anything they have to do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And I think, you know, culturally and also just individually, each of us has our own, you know, challenge with this. The good news is, you know, a bodhicitta can be brought into any activity. So, you know, we can make our jobs more meaningful, even if, you know, it feels like they're devoid of meaning. Especially like, I mean, sales, it depends what you're selling, obviously. You know, there are things in Buddhism we don't advise, like alcohol and arms and things like that. But nonetheless, it's like, you know, if someone's selling shoes, they're helping someone to feel more comfortable in their feet and to, you know, maybe help their body in a certain way. And so, you know, we can reflect on that and bring that into our work. It's not easy to do, it's challenging, but we can. And yeah, in the bigger, you know, topic you were, you know, bringing forward and reflecting on, you know, we do have to kind of question. Like I said, I think we're in a position to both question it very well, because a lot of developing countries, what I notice when I'm in them is the younger people are influenced by the United States, and they want all the sneakers and, you know, the stuff, and they're influenced by music and the culture, and and they think it's attainable because we make it look like it's attainable, but we're actually not happy, most of us, right? I'm not saying everybody, but, you know, a lot of people, the more they attain, it doesn't make them happier. And so, and that's obviously a cliche, but it's true. And so I think we can use that to our advantage. We can see like, well, where do I stop chasing, you know? And so we need to be practical too, you know, like buy Bitcoin. No, I'm just joking. I'm a big Bitcoin fan. But anyway, we need to be practical, you know, in the sense like we need to make sure, you know, we do live in a system, obviously, where we have to provide for our own health insurance and these kinds of things. So that's true. And then like when is it enough? And I think, and what can we simplify? I'm a big fan of, actually, Sonny Rinpoche, his advice is very interesting on this, which I like. He says to younger people, he says, make enough to retire early and live simply. So he's like, basically like focus on earning money and then retire at, you know, 40 or 50 or something if you can. Now, for some of us who are older who aren't in that position, I think it's about simplifying as much as we can. Like for me, I try to live a simple life materially, and I kind of enjoy that too, but I try to do that in order to provide more space where my money can go longer. But I don't know what position I'll be in a year. We never know. So it's kind of like, you know, you never know where it's going. So I'm kind of at that take. We have to be practical, but also cut through that and see and put, you know, the more we practice, the more we embody the Dharma, the more we're just naturally not going to be interested. It's like, okay, well then I have to work. I have kids to support and or debt. Let's bring the work into the Dharma. So we don't have to feel like we can't do it or like we're stuck. We can bring everything into the Dharma. Yeah. I'm in a unique position. Like I don't have kids right now. So I understand not everybody's in that position, you know?
Thank you very much. That was a different insight, a different kind of look at it than I was having earlier.
Cool. Thanks, Glenn.
Nicole, any questions from the Gampa?
Renunciation Mind always puts people to sleep. There's not much.
Yes, sorry, Patty. We are coming here.
Okay.
Chad, you're on the screen.
Oh, hi, I'm Chad. Thank you for the talk. It's been very nice. Can you explain a little bit about skillful means? I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I just used it in this title, right? But generally, it describes, in traditional Buddha Dharma, we have the two wings of basically wisdom and skillful means. And so the wisdom is the relating to the nature of reality, relating to shunyata, to how things are. The skillful means is everything else. So actually, like, skillful means includes everything, like meditation, studying the Dharma, developing compassion, developing loving kindness. The methods I taught the last 2 weeks of just relating to the body and sort of awareness in the body and connecting, not trying to suppress. That's a skillful mean. So really anything that moves us closer to the truth is a skillful mean from a Buddhist perspective. So this is kind of how wisdom and means, or compassion, the other wing of the Dharma, help each other, where wisdom is the ultimate nature. It's actually what liberates us. Skillful means brings us closer to that ultimate nature, and also accumulates merit and capacity when we attain Buddhahood. Yeah. So it can be a lot of things. It's kind of like a general term that can mean everything, every practice, every method that's going to lead to wisdom, that's not wisdom, right? I like that. And I like this take. We'll talk about it next Sunday because it kind of, you reminded me of it. I want you to, it would be a good reflection this week too, is like, again, because I was talking about belief last time, what is everything in the Buddha Dharma leading to, right? So I just said it's all pointing towards wisdom. So I want you to reflect on that a little bit, because it's sort of like, yeah, it's nice to be a kind person, but are we trying to be a good or kind person? Is that like the ultimate result of what we're trying to achieve? Although being a good or kind person can help, right? So it can be a skillful means leading to wisdom, because if we're just nasty and in a bad mood all the time, I don't think we're seeing reality quite clearly. But being a good or kind person, does it also mean we're necessarily seeing reality clearly? Maybe a little clearer, but we have to think about this. I like these kind of controversial questions because they get us thinking. So I kind of answered it, but nonetheless, it's good to reflect more. So maybe we'll close if there's no more, because I got to go right at the 12:30 here. But thank you all so much. I appreciate your attentiveness. And so we'll kind of continue next week. And you're always welcome. If questions come up during the week, go ahead and, just jot a note down, because sometimes we don't remember when we're in the session. Also, the practice this week is blend the handshaking with shamatha. So you can start with handshaking practice just to kind of find groundedness in the body, then connect with awareness a little bit more, and try to move the practice into traditional shamatha. Okay. Janchu Sam Chorin Po She Ma Ke Pa Nam Ge Gyur Chi Gyawa Nyam Pa Me Pa Yang Go Ne Gondo Ta War Sho Chi Ten Kam Dir Pen De Ma Lu Pa Gan Le Jung We Sam Pe Yi Jin Gadren Sun Me Tenzin Gatso Lang So Wa Deb So To Je Mon Trub Sho To Tsu Chan Jin Jang Gong Ge We Tenzin Kyang Pe We Kun Tzu Bo Por De Cho Song Kor We Leg Mon Tu Dru Pa Dang So Du Je Gon Du Jab Ten Sho. Great.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much. I appreciate it. We all do. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Thanks,
With-
Patty.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
So much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.